Hey everyone, welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, as always. Alright, thank you for listening. Start out with that this time. Um, I promise not to dwell on the following, but I've been trying to focus a little bit more on, gratitude for what I have, even if it's not, I don't have the world's biggest audience, I know that, but I do have people that listen, and thank you. Thank you a lot for that. Um, Focusing on some of the positive things and what I can be grateful for is, I found that to be a very good antidote to the apparently escalating chaos of the world around us. And woof, oh boy, is that. I mean, we're all fairly confident things are going to get worse before they potentially get better, but still. Alright, not going to dwell on that too much because I don't mind occasionally talking about, politics when it's appropriate for this show or my religious beliefs when it's appropriate. If it's relevant to the conversation, hey, I'll talk about it, but I'm not here to preach. That is not the purpose of this show. So, just thank you. Thank you a lot. Um, as always, interact with the product, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, whatever's applicable to your podcast platform of choice, and any sharing you can do on social media or with other people in your sphere of influence if you'd rather talk to them in person about it. Who knows? Maybe they will. Um, all right, on the agenda this evening, last night, UFC on ESPN 59. You know, I said during the preview, there's some stuff here that might be okay. That may not necessarily be the worst. Ultimately, the card was okay on paper, and it turned out being, okay in practice. Um, some downers, but what card doesn't have downers these days? We will preview UFC on. Is that on ESPN 60? Yeah, UFC Vegas 94 slash UFC on ESPN 60, which is a dog of a card. I mean, yeah, we'll get into it. Um, it's not good. There's just no two ways around that. It's just this is back in the warehouse. This is warehouse fights up and down. It is. Oy. But we'll preview it because that's what we do here. And news, some decent news this week actually. Some potential spoilers for fights coming off at UFC Noche have been released. A few other fights got made, so news of the week, such as it is. You all know the drill. Unless you're new, in which case this is the drill. No. All right. Yeah, that's it for the preamble. So let's jump into things, shall we? All right. UFC on ESPN 59. We start at the top with the picks and how that all went down because I am keeping track of my predictions this year, which has been an interesting thing to do. So ultimately, 7-4 with one no contest. The only pick I changed was Jasdavicius and Klein. Um, yeah, that was it. That was the only one I changed. There were a few that I got real iffy about the closer we got to the event, but I'm not. Part of the I give myself a little bit of leeway on some of these, but if I go through the whole thing and just change my mind off air about everything, then I mean, kind of what's the point, right? I could just artificially inflate my numbers, and I don't want to do that. So I do try to give myself a few bits of leeway where I can change my mind because I don't always have enough time to do, a decent look at all these fighters. But I'm trying very hard to kind of stick with what I do here. Again, some reasonable alterations permitting. Um, so the only one I switched was Jasdovicius and Klein. I was the big one I kind of thought maybe I was going to be wrong about. Well, Ponzinibbio and Salikov was just a close fight. Should not. I should have given more credence to just um, how diminished Ponzinibbio is these days. I think I said even at the time, I like that's a close fight. You know, that's winnable for Salikov. I don't know. I maybe should have leaned towards him. What else did I get wrong? Got Bonfim right. He made me sweat that one. Jean Silva and Drew Dober. That one I gave myself an out if I wanted to change my mind. I didn't. Ultimately, I stuck with Silva. Another one I was sweating. Yeah, just we'll talk about some of these in particular. Okay, here was the one that I didn't. The size difference between these two guys didn't strike me until they were actually in the cage. But Julian Erosa and Christian Rodriguez. Um, Rodriguez does not really have the frame for featherweight. It didn't really become apparent until he was in there with, and it's not like he just got blown out by Erosa, but the more they fought, the more it became apparent. Like one of these guys is a featherweight, one of these guys is a bantamweight who has just struggled to make weight for whatever reason. He either needs to do some serious adjustment of his frame if he wants to stay at featherweight to actually bulk up, become a bit more of a tank, or he needs to figure out why he was missing weight and go back down to bantamweight because, as is, I don't think featherweight's a good fit for him. Fremd and Petrosky, that was always whatever. Oh yeah, Van and Johnson. I spent most of my preview for this talking up Charles Johnson, how I've kind of been picking him a lot. And I'm a big believer in his skills, and then ultimately I went with Van, but Johnson might finally be getting settled in the UFC. So we'll talk about that one. That one, maybe I should have got that one right. And then again, when I saw Jasdovicius and Klein next to each other, I went, okay. Klein, it's not like Klein got, once again, not like Klein got blown out of the water either. There were some moments in that third round when kind of maybe I shouldn't have switched. She's game, but so 7-4. One no contest, which was the Al Hassan and Cody Brundage fight, because we'll get to it. So 7-4, one no contest. I'm okay with that. I think the only one of these that sort of annoyed me, Van and Johnson. That one, not to diminish Van, but I think I should have been leaning towards Johnson on that one because I know how good he is. I mean, I know Van's very good too. Like that was a well-matched fight. It was a very good fight in practice, but that one, the Rodriguez and Erosa fight, I was never going to get right. There were factors there that just were not apparent until it was way too late for me to feel like I was behaving ethically, changing a pick. I mean, like, I'm not going to change it mid-fight. That's just stupid. But mostly, I kind of wish I'd gone with my gut and gone with Johnson instead of Van. But 7-4 is nothing to be ashamed of. So year to date, I am now 191-88. There's been 4 no contests all year, no draws yet in the UFC. All right, but that was the picks, how that went. All right, the fights. Let's talk about the main event. Rose Namajunas defeats late notice replacement fighter Tracy Cortez via unanimous decision, 249-46, which I think is fine. And that's what I had. I thought Cortez did enough to take the 5th. And a 48-47, which is a little confusing. I don't know what round other than the fifth you could have given to Tracy Cortez. Let me have a quick look real fast. I think the UFC has that part up. Yeah, we got Denver here. Okay, so that's going to be at the bottom, isn't it? They do. Yeah. So our 48-47 also gave Cortez the fourth. That at a bare minimum, that would be super generous. I don't agree with that. Fifth round, yeah, Namajunas kind of just played defense in the fifth round. But mostly, this was just Cortez not really being able to find offense on Namajunas. Rose does a really good job the first round and a half of being really light on her feet, really bouncing around, landing decent punches. She was getting that takedown that she likes. You know, I've talked about it before, the double leg where your outside leg goes all the way around theirs. Was just better on the ground as a general rule than Cortez. Was able to find better positions. Not the most scintillating ground and pound most of the time, but uh, that's been a thing most of her career. Like, it's not that it's non-existent, but she doesn't generate a lot of force when she's on the mat. She's got good punching power, but her ground and pound is not the most devastating. It doesn't have to be. Mostly it's there to open up submissions or just, annoy you and force you to move while she retains control. But I have a real hard time seeing her like doing a lot of damage down there, but enough to win. Certainly enough to win. Rose she seems to slow down a bit as the fight goes on. Not a lot, and some of it's also because by the time when she gets a read on you, she knows how much she has to move, and so she becomes a bit more economical as time. There's a degree to which it is economy. You're just becoming more economical rather than I don't have it in me to keep moving the same way. If you don't have to expend more energy, you don't. But she's also slowed down in the fifth round of some other fights. And I think there was a little bit of that here. She said she wants to fight for the belt. I find that unlikely. Look, 125 is not the deepest division right now, and we're still doing another Valentina and Grasso fight, allegedly. You've got Manon Fior. She's going to be fighting soon. And no, Manon Fior just beat Erin Blanchfield, right? Yeah. Um, Fior should be next, and Fior beat Rose. Like that was not a very. I won't say it wasn't competitive. That sounds like that'd be dismissive of what Rose did. It was a very clear victory for Manon Fior. So let's get that handled, and if Rose wants to wait until after that, fair enough. But she's not getting a title shot off of this win. I don't think. It would be a little ridiculous for her to jump the line like that at 125. I mean, she's got 2 wins in that weight class. One was Amanda Hebos. If this had been Macy Barber, even then. And this was a good win for Rose, but it wasn't. This was not the kind of win that gives you a mandate, so to speak, right? Like you put a stamp on this one and go, no, me. Everything about what I've done, not only here but preferably the last fight or two, says it's me. This was not that. She'll probably have to win one more, or just wait and hope that nobody else comes in and steals her thunder. It's my read on the situation. Cortez, everybody knew this was a big ask for her. Come in at elevation, short notice, take a significant step up in competition. She was supposed to fight on this upcoming card, the one we're going to preview, and was supposed to be fighting Miranda Maverick, which I think is a much more reasonable opponent, all things considered, for both of them. This was a big ask. And I don't think this is hugely detrimental to her. Rose is a very good, very, very good fighter. And even if Rose is a little undersized at flyweight and doesn't quite seem to have the pop that she did at strawweight, she's still difficult to beat and was much better than anyone Cortez had fought. So I don't think this hurts Tracy Cortez too much overall, but it's still a loss, and those are never good. But I don't think this was going to be like hugely damaging. If anything, it kind of reinforces she's about where we all thought she was, maybe a little better, but about where I think in general we had a good read on her at the moment. We'll see how she improves coming out of this. Co-main event, Muslim Salikov defeats Santiago Ponzinibbio by split decision, 29-28. Whatever. I shouldn't say whatever. I mean the scoring is a little whatever. There was not a single round that was unanimous. So Chris Lee was 29-28 Salikov. He gives Salikov 1 and 2 and Ponzinibbio the third. Little weird. I gave Ponzinibbio 1 and 3. I gave Salikov 2. So none of the judges agreed with me because we get to Eric Colon and he gave Ponzinibbio 1 and 2 and Salikov 3. And Darren Abeda gave Salikov 1 and 2 and Ponzinibbio 3. So he and Chris Lee had the same scorecard. But none of them agreed on all three of them did not agree on a single round. Which you might think is weird. You can get that with split decisions. Like everyone agrees on who won round 1, and then the others are split. No, all of these were different. And frankly, all of those are valid. This was a relatively close fight. Fought at a decent clip. I don't think it was boring. The third round left a little bit to be desired. The crowd was booing, I think, a little unfairly. Okay, the third round wasn't great, but both men did work throughout the fight. Nobody was just taking it off. You had 3 close rounds. That's what it came down to. And Ponzinibbio doesn't quite seem to have the same pop he used to. His pressure's still okay, but his dynamism has dropped off, and his chin isn't what it used to be. I don't think he ever got like seriously rocked by Salikov, but he got hit. Just ultimately 29-28 either way, I think perfectly fine. Just how it fell that way on that card, on that event. Lightweight, this one. Jean Silva defeats Drew Dober via doctor stoppage, 128 of the third. This was your fight of the night. Absolutely deserved it. Dober mostly southpaw, Silva orthodox. Silva visibly the featherweight here. At featherweight, John Silva is a tank. At lightweight, I don't mean to say that he is, some undersized guy, but he was visibly smaller than Dober. And Dober is not the biggest lightweight in the world. So, for the record, I don't think Jean Silva should use this as hey, I'm going to spend a lot of time at lightweight. You're good enough to have success there, but I don't think it's optimal. Until the weight cut becomes unmanageable to featherweight, I think that's where he should be. These two got after it, man. Silva kept landing a lead hook, mostly a check hook. He'd induce a bit of a blitz from Dober, then fade back and kind of swat him with it. He used that to open up a cut over Dober's right eye. Because he has Jean left hook. So he's orthodox, so check hand is the left. Open up a small cut around a little bit above Dober's right eyebrow in the first. Not much, but it was there. Dober was able to land on him as well. Got him to the fence a few times. Landed some good combinations. Silva was able to absorb or mitigate damage and then land a few counters. Some decent kicks from both men. They threw up high kicks on occasion. Second round, right near the end, it's kind of been going Dober's way that round. Not huge, but kind of leaning his way. Then against the fence, Silva hits a beautiful spinning back elbow. I mean, absolutely lovely. Dober comes in. He's coming in with the left hand. Silva's able to slip and rotate and again right elbow right over that cut. Boom, rocks Dober. He follows up with a bit of a combination. Dober does not go down because the man has a head like a cinder block. I mentioned before, like that guy's been stopped by strikes like twice in his career. When you look at some of his fights, that's kind of a nutty statistic. But that elbow landed on the cut and opened it up a little bit more. To the point where I think they had the doctor check on it between rounds. Doctor said he's okay. It was worse, but I don't think it was a fight ender at that point in time. We get back to a little bit more in the third, and Silva lands that same elbow because when you land with a weird technique like that, there's a tendency of fighters to do it repeatedly. So if you land if you land a flying knee, you go back to the flying knee repeatedly until you choose not to or it stops working completely. If you land a spinning elbow, of course you can try it again. Why wouldn't you? It doesn't land as clean the second time, but it's still, force around that cut. It makes it worse. Uh, and the referee pauses the action, gets the doctor in there to check on it now, and now it's too bad. Like that cut started small, started not a big deal. Not in a great spot, but if you looked at it at the end of the first round, it's clearly not a fight-ending cut. Between rounds 2 and 3, it merits consideration. After that last little bit when Silva was able to keep hitting that same spot, it was quite bad and absolutely merited the stoppage. No issues with this cut with the stoppage here whatsoever. Really fun fight. Both guys went at it. Look this fight up if you are going to look something up from this fight, from this card. This is one of the fights I'd recommend. Yeah, really good win for Silva. In fact, one of the few times he said after the fight, I didn't get a bonus for my last performance when he knocked out Charles Jourdain because he missed weight. But he said he'd really like fight of the night for this one. He got it, and they both deserved that. This was easily the fight of the night. What would be the next one? Probably Johnson and Van would be the second choice between if I had to pick another one. But this was, by all appreciable metrics, this was better. This was a better fight. So look this one up. Jean Silva on that Fighting Nerds team. I mentioned this when I previewed this one. Silva comes from that camp. It's very good. You got Caio Bajalio. He put that group together, and he selected some very talented guys. They're not undefeated in the UFC, I think, as a team. There's like one or two losses sprinkled in there. But on the whole, they're doing quite well. That is a group you should pay attention to. Silva, assuming he doesn't have any more weight issues at featherweight, that is a talented fighter. He's going to cause problems for a lot of guys. Welterweight's up next. Gabriel Bonfim defeated Angelosa via unanimous decision. 129-28, 230-27s. Yeah, wasn't a great fight. A lot of clinching from Losa. Bonfim able to throw some knees, but Losa just did some good grappling in the first, and it seemed to really slow down Bonfim. Clearly Bonfim recovered and won the fight, but you could give Losa the first, and Bonfim was not what he is normally after that. Both of the Bonfim brothers came into the UFC and were hyped. We had a couple of good performances out of them in their debuts. I mean, Ishmael knocked out Terrence McKinney with a flying knee, and Gabriel won his UFC debut. I forget who he beat. I'm gonna look that up because I want to be certain. Where are you? There you are. Sorry. Does not have a wiki, so I got to go through here. Talking about Bonfim. Okay. Yeah, 16-1, 3-1 in the UFC. Okay, yeah, it was Munir and Lazez, and then Trevin Giles. Okay, both first round finishes. Nicholas Dalby brought him back down to earth a little bit. Handed him his first loss. Bonfim just fought at an unsustainable pace. Here, I think both of the Bonfim brothers have kind of come back down to earth. I'm not saying they're not talented. I'm not saying there's not upside to them. I think they are, and I think there is. But there was... I'm not trying to say easy matchmaking for them. That would be disingenuous to their opponents. But look, your UFC debut is against Munir Lazez. You're 13-0, he's 11-2. I don't think that's an unfair match. Then Trevin Giles, like neither of those guys are bums, but they're also favorable. Then that third fight, man, Nicholas Dalby's a veteran. He has fought some very tough guys. He has won fights he shouldn't have won. He was not expected to win. I shouldn't say shouldn't have. Fights he was not expected to win. He is super technical, pushes a pretty high pace, good counter wrestling, and he shut down. He dealt with a decent first round, but kept a good pace, wore down Bonfim in the clinch, and eventually got him out of there. Losa was kind of trying to replicate a little bit of that, but didn't have the same skill set. I just think both Bonfim brothers, they're still going to be successful, but there was some... This wasn't the same kind of talk that you get around other guys that was, like, ridiculous, but there was a lot of hype. That has cooled, and I think probably to their better. If there's holes in your game that need to be ironed out, it is much better to figure them out and to go through some of those rough patches, even in wins. Like if you have a rough win, do that against guys who are not the best and not at the highest profile. That's what the whole development process is supposed to be, and they're still developing fighters. So he got a win here that he absolutely needed to get, but this was not... If you expected, another blistering finish that, like, yeah, I'm back and I'm the next champion, this wasn't that. Which is fine. They don't all have to be that. In fact, if you're gonna get tested in the UFC, things are gonna go wrong for you at some point. And it's better to have the things go wrong for you when it's not going to derail everything. Losing your third UFC fight to a guy like Dalby is not the end of the world. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. If that first, if the wheels come off when you are pushed to like a title shot or a number one contenders fight before you're ready, they might never get put back on. That doesn't happen all the time. That doesn't happen all the time in the UFC, that particular circumstance, but it does happen, and it can be, again, you can never... There are guys who never get things back together. So have your setbacks early, have things go wrong early, learn how to deal with them, learn from them, and then rebuild. And he's still a little bit rebuilding after the first loss of his career. All right, featherweight. Julian Erosa with a guillotine choke over Christian Rodriguez, 4:49 of the first. the size difference here was real, as well as the strength difference. Rodriguez landed a few good punches early, had a pretty decent 1-2 going, some good pressure. Erosa just longer, little bit craftier, a little bit trickier, used some experience to his advantage, landed some good punches of his own. Then they got wrestling, and Rodriguez is a good wrestler, but there was a strength, there was a physicality difference here. I know a lot of the like jujitsu guys and a lot of the grappling guys at all tend to, a certain segment of them tend to downplay the effectiveness of size of strength and athleticism. No, pure technique will carry you. No, pure technique will work miracles against people who don't know what they're doing. I think I've said this before as well. Like if your primary concern, the reason you start, a grappling art like jujitsu, is self-defense, what do you need to do to defend yourself? If you're a good blue belt, not even like a great blue belt, if you're a good blue belt, you're probably fine. That will handle 90-ish% of somewhere between like 85 and 90% of the people who might cause you trouble. If you're a good blue belt, if you're a good blue belt, probably from a good school, you will be able to handle yourself. That's really all you need for self-defense in general, because the average person doesn't know what they're doing. The average person might watch too much MMA and think they know how to finish a double leg, and they don't. They've seen people do double legs, but they don't really know what they're doing. And they're the kind of guys who will be able to go, oh no, I'm in a triangle choke, instead of like, wait, what the heck happened? But have no idea how to properly set it up or how to defend or any of that stuff. And if you're a good blue belt, that's at your disposal. And by the time you get to be like a good purple belt, you're just, there's guys who will give you trouble in those kind of circumstances, but most, at that point, I think you're over 90% to just kind of, you can handle most things if it comes down to physicality. Because, again, most people don't really know what they're doing. Assuming you've added appropriate sides to your training that deal with some things for self-defense outside of jiu-jitsu for sport jiu-jitsu's sake. But that's not to say, sorry, I occasionally annoy the grappling community with that one. or the self-defense crowd who do the, for the streets. Look, man, you train for sport because it's the closest thing you can do to approximate. If you occasionally in your rolling implement a couple of things like, hey, what do you do about weapons? Or some of the situational awareness of, is there more than one guy? Which is really, if jiu-jitsu falls apart, the two things that screw with it in real world, in self-defense kind of settings, it's the addition of weaponry and not being aware, particularly not being aware of it. Look, if you're a good jiu-jitsu guy, if you're a good blue belt, purple belt, you know how to control a wrist. So if someone's got a knife, you know how to control for it. The question is, do you recognize that it's there before they start stabbing you? That's the question. And the other one is, so you incorporate a little bit of weapons work into your rolling. Not every time, doesn't have to be crazy, but do it on occasion. Do it somewhat regularly. Once a month would be my hunch. Your school might want to do a class once a month that is, okay, we're rolling with weapons. Every now and then roll in your street clothes, because rolling in those is very different than rolling in a gi. But the other big one that messes with jiu-jitsu is multiple attackers. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu that is fundamentally based around the assumption of one-on-one, and that's the real thing that might get you in trouble. The scratching, the biting. If you're worried, if you want to know what happens when you start adding scratching and biting and that stuff to jiu-jitsu, roll with the white belts. You'll find out in a hurry. It all still pretty much works. There's some very minor things that it's not even worth discussing as a general rule. But the point there is Rodriguez is he's a very good grappler in general, but your technique will fail at a certain size differential. Now that applies to even someone who doesn't really know what they're doing. Like watch the video of Dustin Poirier rolling with Brian Shaw, right? Dustin Poirier is Brian Shaw, bless him, great guy, but clearly does not know grappling like Dustin Poirier does. But he's so much bigger that they do the drill where it's like where Poirier's like trying to get out from under Brian Shaw, and Shaw knows enough at this point. He's done something. This was like when he was training for his MMA fight, and so he knew enough to be a problem and all he was doing was holding him down. And Dustin Poirier, professional fighter, one of the best, an all-time. Dustin Poirier is an all-timer. I don't know exactly where he ranks, but all-time action hero campaigner in the lightweight divisions. Can't really get out from under him because the size difference is so big. And the other thing about this is the closer you are in technique, the more size and strength matters. And the reverse of that is true as well. The closer you are in size, the more technique matters. In this instance, Erosa was just bigger enough and stronger enough than Rodriguez to kind of have his way with him on the mat and caught his neck in a transition. Good win for Erosa's UFC careers have been weird because this is his third trip to the UFC that he's in. And his first UFC stint was very abbreviated in 2015-2016. Won his UFC debut, split decision, they got knocked out by Teruto Ishihara. He comes back via the Contender Series in 2018. Loses 3 fights. Devontae Smith, Grant Dawson, and Julio Arce. Wins 1 outside the UFC, comes back on somewhat short notice, beats Sean Woodson, beats Nate Landwehr, gets knocked out by Sung-Woo Choi, beats Charles Jourdain, beats Steven Peterson. Peterson missed weight for that one. Then beat Hakeem Dawodu. Then gets knocked out by Alex Caceres, who hadn't stopped anybody and it felt like forever. Then lost to Fernando Padilla. Then won his last 2 over Ricardo Ramos and Christian Rodriguez. So current form, he's kind of starting to figure some stuff out a little bit. Setback for Rodriguez. This should be his wake-up call to figure out what his problem was at 135 and fix it. Or, as I mentioned before, seriously alter his body to be more in line with featherweight. Because this is the way he is right now, featherweight is not the appropriate weight class for him. And kicking off the main card, we had a no contest in 37 seconds of the first round. Abdul Razak Al Hassan and Cody Brundage. Not the first time Cody Brundage has found himself in one of these predicaments. So Brundage comes out predictably, tries to wrestle. Shoots a single leg. Al Hassan bounces himself into the fence to help defend and starts landing elbows to the side of the head. One of these drops Brundage. And he's still holding the single leg, where he recatches it after he loses it. And Al Hassan is now in kind of a modified crucifix, and he's throwing elbows. He's trying to throw them to the side of the head. Brundage is doing one of the things that it's not wrong what he's doing, but if you do this, I'm torn on this one because I'm about to say something that everyone should fight by the rules, okay? Let me start with that. Rules say don't hit the back of the head. Every rule set in MMA, in boxing, in kickboxing, whatever, don't hit the back of the head. There's important stuff back there. the brain stem, and like it controls all the automatic functions in your body, like your heartbeat or breathing. Your breathing can switch between automatic and non-auto and conscious. I forget the different type. Like one's skeletal, one's the different types of nervous system activations. It's probably more information than is necessary for the sake of this. But very important stuff goes on back there. Don't mess with it. And Brundage is holding this single leg. Both of his arms and shoulders are up, and he's got the front of his head kind of against Al Hassan, or pointed inward, and he's got his arms up around his ears, holding the leg. The back of his head is completely exposed. Now, this shouldn't matter in theory, because in theory everyone knows don't hit that, leave it alone. Al Hassan is throwing elbows, and he's trying to hit the side. He is not aiming for it, but because of the way that Brundage's arms and shoulders are protecting kind of the sides of his head, stuff is sort of deflecting into that general area. And we saw the replay. Not every one of the elbows that he threw hit the back of the head, hit the illegal spot. Not all of them. But a few of them did. And the referee halts the action because you can't hit someone in the back of the head like that. And Cody Brundage, who... Look, man, I said this when he got that DQ win over Jacob Malkoun. You want to avoid this problem, don't foul. Real simple. Real simple. Don't foul the guy. I don't begrudge a fighter who is fouled not being able to continue. I don't begrudge them that. At the same time, the one against Jacob Malkoun I was much more forgiving of. That was a much worse blow, and I think Brundage was a lot more hurt by that one. This one, I don't know about this one, man. Once again, you want to avoid this complication, just, how about you fight clean? How about that? Just real simple, real easy. Don't foul the guy. You're annoyed about, your fight being called off because the other guy can't see anymore? Huh? Don't poke him in the eye. How hard is that? Don't poke him in the eye. Very rare. I'm not saying you never get weird calls where the referee no, you poked him in the eye, and then no, you didn't. Most of the time, if someone's complaining of an eye poke, there's something there. Not all the time, most of the time. And if you want to avoid, we got a no contest here, especially in a fight you were winning, don't poke the guy in the eye. You don't want your fights called off. Sorry. It's late when I'm doing this one. You don't want your fights called off. Don't hit the guy in the back of the head. Not really a complicated proposition. But once again, Brundage just not having the constitution to try and overcome. I'm not saying he quit. Other people are. I'm not quite going to go that far. Because the man got fouled. But I don't think it's unfair to point out that other fighters in this kind of position have chose to continue the fight. Now, I'm not Cody Brundage. I don't know how bad this was. This might have felt very bad to him, and that's why I'm not out here saying he quit. I'm not going to do that. I am going to say, at this point, I don't think it's unfair to call into question his physical resilience. Not the first time this has happened to him. Not the first time he had this exact reaction. I feel bad for the guy in the sense that he keeps getting hit in the back of the head. Because you shouldn't be doing that. But this is also not doing him any favors. And I don't imagine. I mean, half his UFC wins are just weird. I mean, okay, a couple of these are legit, but that losing streak and then the elbow to the back of the head. Got a good win over Zach Reese. That was a slam thing, but he didn't have a lot for Bo Nickel. Some of that's just because it's Bo Nickel, but there's, I don't know. This is to the degree that part of what you do in the UFC is try to ingratiate yourself to management, which might be a gross thing to say, but it's true. Might be a gross reality. He is not doing that. Alassane was pissed. Not saying I don't understand it. I do. I'm also saying don't foul the guy. You wouldn't be in this problem. You wouldn't be having this problem. Um, yeah, so that was how we kicked off the main card. Not great. The prelims, Charles Johnson knocked out Joshua Van with punches 20 seconds into the third round. I had this one apiece going into the third. A lot of people had Van up 2-0, which I don't think is unfair for the record. Um, have a quick look through some things here. Wow, we had okay. So Judge Mark Sanchez had this going into the third, 2018 for Johnson. Interesting. Chris Lee had it 1919, Van the first, Johnson the second, and then Dan Abeda had Van 2018. So get Van one and two. So we were kind of all over the place there. Um, Not sure I agree with Sanchez giving Johnson the first. They were both competitive rounds. This was a good fight. Look this one up. This is the other one I would say look up. Um, Van's body work in the first round was pretty solid. Did a good job of kind of mitigating distance, getting around the kicks of Johnson, and then starting to land his combinations in close. Van still has a lot of upside. He's an active fighter, methodical, moves forward, good body to head punches, pretty slick boxing. I still think pretty highly of his upside. Johnson was just able to, he had some good calf kicks, some pretty good front kicks going at different times. And Johnson's fairly slick in the pocket as well. In fact, Van's pocket success seemed to bother Johnson a little bit because he's used to being the better guy there, and he wasn't quite the better guy in that space. But third round, he comes out and really looks to push things. Uh, clocks, exits the pocket and then clocks Van with a right hand. Really nicely done there. In the pocket, things were going a little bit Van's way, so Johnson just making the adjustment, exit the pocket, plant, and re-engage. Nice little sequence there. Then hits him with a long-range uppercut, drops him. Heck of a win for Johnson. I've been talking that guy up for a while. Just, should have picked him here. This one, if there's one that I really am a little bit annoyed with myself at, it's this one. Now on a 3-fight winning streak. And he had a 3-fight losing streak before this, in fairness to him. That O'Day Osborne fight you could have given to him. And the Estevam fight was winnable. I don't think the scoring was off. It was just a little bit of some stuff that Johnson did in the third that I think hurt his ability to get a finish when he needed a finish. But 3 in a row now. Finally got a finish. That is his first finish since he stopped Jimmy Flick, who another guy with just a very questionable chin. But Charles Johnson's good. And Joshua Van is also a good fight. Look this one up. Johnson would like to fight someone ranked next. I don't think that's an unfair request. I don't think that's unfair at all. Uh, Women's flyweight next. Jasmine Jasdavicius defeated Fatima Klein via unanimous decision, 30-27. Once they got into the clinch, and especially on the mat, Jasdavicius, bit bigger, knew how to use it, and a little bit the superior grappler. Klein struggled to consistently get away from her. Had a couple of good wall walk sequences, hit a really nice arm drag at one point, actually. Her back was on the fence. She kind of arm dragged Jasdavicius, spun her around, and then got to the back on the clinch. Nice move there. It's a fairly standard arm drag, but there's a dearth of good arm drags in MMA, especially from that position. And that was a pretty good one from her. Just ultimately a little bit undersized. And honestly, being a little bit undersized meant that some of the technical stuff Jasdavicius did was just exacerbated on the mat in particular. Third round, though, Klein came out and fought like she knew she needed a finish. She landed some good punches. Her hand speed carried pretty well. This was a fairly clear win for Jasdavicius. But 30-27, if you just look at that, you'll think this was a blowout. This was a clear win, but this was competitive for pretty much the whole way through. And I actually came away from this feeling very optimistic about Klein's future. She's normally a strawweight, and I think she'll give some of the girls down their problems. So, bantamweight, 18 seconds. Montel Jackson, a clean 1-2 down the pipe, just as Dominic Cruz says, watch for the clean straight punches of Montel Jackson. Floored Blackshear. Done deal. Really good win for him. Women's flyweight again. Luana Santos chokes out Maria Agapova with a rear naked choke, 3:27 of the first. Santos is still pretty rough on the feet. There's a lack of distance understanding for a lot of her striking. She does a lot of, she and Agapova both were doing the let's kick the invisible person 4 inches in front of our opponent. Once this got more tied up and got to the mat, Santos had a very clear advantage there and put it to use. Andre Petrosky defeated Josh Fremd via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. This fight sucked. And Evan Elder defeated Darius Flowers with an arm triangle choke, 1:46 of the second. I think Jack Slack had the best take on this one. Darius Flowers fights like a guy who doesn't realize he always loses. He came out looking to strike. That guy's cardio was just not here. This whole fight came together like during the week of. I didn't even have a prediction for it last week when I did the preview, so I picked Elder for the record. And if you want to know how I arrived at that, I know that Darius Flowers is just not all that great, and the odds were very heavily with Elder, so I just went with them. Yeah, Elder just dealt with some early. Flowers has a good 4 minutes in him, and then everything starts to fall off. And Elder got him down, superior grappler, got him out of there. Good enough win for Elder. And that was the card. It was okay. It wasn't great. It was okay. It looked okay on paper. It was okay in practice. Little bit slow, main card. I mean, your first 2 fights ended in the first round. One of them very quickly with the no contest, but still. There was downtime throughout between some of these fights that just felt unnecessarily stretched. Your bonuses, already mentioned, fight of the night went to Silva and Dober. Thumbs up, no problems. Performances went to Charles Johnson and Montel Jackson. No issues there either. If I were going to throw another one in there, I would have given it to Arosa. If I was gonna, the other consideration as far as performances go would have been Julian Arosa's guillotine choke, but No problem with Johnson. Johnson getting that was almost a guarantee. And then Jackson, you do anything in 18 seconds in the UFC, and they tend to be pretty happy with you. So, full report over in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. As always, stop by, give it a read. If you're able to, it's always appreciated when you can. Okay, so that's where all that is. Where's my other button? There it is. Okay. So moving on, UFC on ESPN 60 will be coming your way this Saturday. We are back in the warehouse, and we have a very uninspiring card. All right, hang on, let me leave that one up. And all right, let's have a look at this card. Is this the whole card? This cannot be the whole card. No, that's part of the card. Why is this broken up over on my odds site? Alright, there's the other half. It's separated by the odds for the Octagon card. Okay, so July 21st. Main event, Amanda Lemos and Virna Jandiroba. Can I tell you how little I care about this fight? You might get the next title challenger out of this. Be a tough sell for Lemos, who's already been beat up by Weili Zhang. By Zhang Weili, excuse me. Yeah, Zhang's already kind of beat the crap out of her. So it would be a tough ask. Jandiroba been doing some good work for a while. Her UFC losses are to Carla Esparza. I kind of thought she won that fight. Mackenzie Dern, that was a very clean loss. And Amanda Hebos. She's won her last 3 over Angela Hill, Marina Rodriguez, and Lupi Godinez. Had that weird win over Kanako Murata where there was an arm injury. She's kind of scrappy on the feet. Is a very good jiu-jitsu player, particularly if she's on top. Then Lemos is mostly known for the hands. That's kind of what got her. Her title shot was a stoppage win over Marina Rodriguez. She's strong enough to grab some chokes in transition. Coming off a win over Mackenzie Dern. That was a weird fight. I don't have a lot of hopes for this fight being all that entertaining. It's probably not going to suck. I don't think this will be the worst fight on the card. What do I think will be the worst fight on this card? Yeah, there it is. Took me a second. There it is. We'll get to it. But nothing about this card screams you have to watch it. Not a single fight on this card. This is one I would easily skip if I wasn't covering it. Gonna go with Jandiroba here. Not by a huge margin. But Lemos is pretty big. The 5 rounds thing is kind of why I'm leaning towards Jandiroba. Lemos really struggled down the stretch in her title fight. She's got power. That's certainly not to be underestimated. I'm going to lean just a little bit towards Jandiroba here. Your co-main event, I have because Jun Young Park amuses me to no end. He's coming off a split decision loss to Andre Muniz. He could have won that. Had a winning streak going before that. Wins over Eric Anders, Joseph Holmes, Dennis Talulin, and Albert Duraev. I just got a soft spot for this guy. He came in and fought, lost Anthony Hernandez, but gave him a pretty decent fight. Went on a 3-fight winning streak. Then had a fight of the night with RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez. Then went on his winning streak before he ran into Muniz. I just like the guy. He's fighting Brad Tavares, who I have an immense amount of respect for. Man's only 36, but he's got this will be his 30th fight, and he's been with the UFC in particular since 2010. June of 10. Wow, this will be just after his 14th year in the UFC, his 14th anniversary, basically, with the UFC. That's some crazy longevity, and he's had ups and he's had downs. Coming off a loss to Gregory Rodriguez, he's just looked like the miles are adding up. And, dude, 14 years in the UFC, that will take a toll on you. I'm sentimental here. I don't mind admitting it. I'm going with Park. It's probably a bit more of an emotional pick than a purely logical one, but I'm going with Park. I en- I enjoy his fights. They're not always the best, but I can't like everything that's only the best. There are just some fighters and some fights that, again, they're not the best, but you enjoy them, and I enjoy most of his work, so I'll have some fun. I'll pick the Iron Turtle. I don't care. I don't care if my pick's wrong. Um, Featherweight, we have Steve Garcia and Seungwoo Choi. This would be Sting. Yes, yes. Choi, weird run through the UFC. Lost his first two fights. Granted, Movsar Evloev and Gavin Tucker. No shame there. Won three in a row. Lost three in a row. Now, those losses, Alex Caceres, Josh Kulabau, he could have won that Kulabau fight. That was split decision. And got stopped by Trezano. That was a rough loss. Coming off a win over Jarno Aarons, though. And Garcia is one of those guys I don't think is really a UFC caliber fighter. Despite my opinion, he's won his last three. Stopped Chase Hooper. Stopped Shaila Nurdenbeke and knocked out Milkiel Costa. Am I misremembering who Mr. Garcia is? I might be. Hang on. I wish to double check who this guy is. I am misremembering who he is. My mistake, sir. Mea culpa. 1,000,000% mea culpa. This is not who I thought it was. Okay. Rewinding. Should have checked that first. Who the heck was I confusing him with? I don't remember his name, but I can see him and his crappy tattoos in my head. So again, big mistake. My apologies, sir. That changes things. I was ready to pick Choi, but having now remembered and looked at who Mr. Garcia is, that is not going to be the case. I'm gonna go with Garcia. I'm yeah, going with Garcia. Not trying to be overly negative about Choi there. There's a lot of guys I would pick him over. Not sure Garcia's one of them at this point. Okay, so next at lightweight we have Kurt Hollebow and Kainan Krzyzewski. Mr. Hollebow fought his way back to the UFC. Won the Ultimate Fighter. He beat Alston Hubbard and then got beaten by Trey Ogden. That was March, just a few months ago. Hollebow in the UFC has been both times, has been a bit of a mixed bag at best. Let me have a look at Krzyzewski here, because he had that weird UFC debut, if memory serves. He's 15-2, lost his UFC. Yeah, Elvis Brenner, who got him with a really nice overhand left. They were having a pretty good fight. And Brenner knocked him out cold. That was a gnarly knockout. It really was. So the question kind of becomes, do I think he's going to rebound here against Holloway? The answer seems like it's probably. Yeah, I don't know that I can. I don't know that I should be picking Holloway to win reliably against UFC guys. I don't know if Krzyzewski is reliably a UFC level fighter, but I'm going to give him that assumption for this one, and we'll just see how that goes. K-R-U-S-C-H-E-W-S-K-Y, okay. K-R-U-S-C-H-E-W-S. Okay. I don't know why that gentleman he's Brazilian. I don't know why he has such a weird last name. And I don't mean to be dismissive. That's just not a very Brazilian sounding last name, is it? Um, Apologies if that's insensitive. And then kicking off the main card at featherweight, the Korean Superboy, Doo-Ho Choi, will fight Senor Perfecto, Bill Algeo. Um, is Algeo Senor Perfecto? I don't actually know. Hang on. So Choi, I mean, I have nothing but respect for the man. He gave us some really good fights, some really good finishes. Unfortunately, he hasn't won a fight since 2016. So 2016, he knocks out Thiago Tavares. He gets a fight with Cub Swanson. That was arguably the fight of the year for 2016. Great fight. Then doesn't fight until 2018 when he gets stopped by Jeremy Stevens. Takes a while off after that. That was January of 18. Then he fights again December of 19. So almost 2 years. Loses to Charles Jourdain. Good fight. Both of those were fights of the night. Then he takes I believe his mandatory military service for South Korea came up after that one. When I think that's when it was. Anyway, he came back and he fought Kyle Nelson. We got a draw that was a little bit funky. There was a point deducted to Choi in round 3, which I don't actually dislike the point deduction, for the record. I still thought he had that fight won. I think I scored it for him. But, watch your head. And maybe that wouldn't have happened. Yeah, so he's in pretty desperate need of a win. And then Bill Algeo. Yeah, that is Senor Perfecto. Algeo is coming off a loss to Kyle Nelson. That was a rough loss. And won 2 in a row before that. TJ Brown, Alexander Hernandez. Dropped a split decision to Andre Fili. A lot of Fili's fights go to split decision. Did I have much of a thought there on that one? No, I don't think I did. The odds are with Algeo. The smart money would be on Algeo here. Am I going to go against that? I'm nothing against Bill Algeo here. Emotionally, I'm kind of rooting for Choi. Don't know if I'm going to pick him. Let me go with Algeo here, but I'm going to let me asterisk that one. I reserve the right to change my mind on that one if I start feeling overly sentimental by the time the fight walks around. All right, that's your main card at the moment. Prelims, we have at flyweight Cody Durden, and Bruno Da Silva. So Da Silva's on a 3-fight winning streak. See, his UFC losses, he technically lost to, well, he technically got a no contest with Khalid Taha. Then lost to David Dvorak, lost to Tiger Ulanbekov. His last 3 fights, wins over J.P. Bays, Victor Rodriguez, and Tyson Nam. The Nam win was fairly impressive. So he's doing pretty decent work, and Durden is one of those guys who I don't know. He had an okay run at one point in the UFC, winning 4 in a row. The win over Charles Johnson was a touch dubious, but both Carlos Mata, J.P. Baez, and then you had Jake Hadley. Those were all okay. Tiger Ulanbekov beat him his last time out. He's a wrestler and a pretty good one. I'm not going to sit here and throw shade on some of his skill, but I think De Silva's probably just a slightly better fighter at this point. Um, Out of curiosity, how do the odds feel about this one? If I can find it. Odds lean slightly towards Durden. I'm going to go with my gut here. I'm going to go Silva. I might be wrong. I'm prepared to be wrong about this one. Not me knocking Cody Durden, but I don't know. He feels a little one-dimensional. And has Silva struggled with wrestlers? Is that what we're kind of leaning on here? That seems to be kind of what the odds are leaning on. I'm still going with my gut there. I'm prepared to be very wrong, as I always am. Featherweight next. Haider Amil and Zhong Yong Lee. There we go. So yeah, Jiang Yong Lee. Oh, I can do it. Let's see. Lee is 11-1. 8-fight winning streak overall. 2-0 in the UFC. He won one of those Road to UFC events. Beating Yazia. Oh yeah, Jia Yi. Or Yi Jia. Yi Jia, okay. Got a win over Blake Builders last time out. Seems fairly talented. This isn't going to be his. I don't think this is his major step up. I don't think Haider Amil is some scrub. He's undefeated, 9-0. Won his UFC debut when he beat Fernie Garcia. That's a solid enough win for UFC debut. It's not, world shattering, but it's good. I think this is Lee. Amil is not a bum, not a gimme, but I think Lee gets. This will probably be Lee's last favorable again, not the right word, but the UFC will tend to only give you 2 or 3 at most of these fights where they still kind of treat you like a guy developing skill rather than treat you as a guy who's been here for a bit, so now you're just in the meat grinder. And I don't think this is his meat grinder fight. It might wind up being that. Amil is solid, but I'm going to lean towards Lee. Let's see. We have Brian Kelleher and Cody Gibson. That's interesting. Kelleher on a 3-fight losing streak. Losses to Umar Nurmagomedov. No shame. Mario Bautista. See previous comment about no shame there. Bautista's quite good. And Cody Garbrandt. He had some success against Garbrandt with the calf kicks, and actually, but ultimately got outgunned there. He's just a little bit, maybe a little bit on the downside of things. I mean, he's 37 at bantamweight. That's kind of old. And he's been around for a while. He's got 39 fights. This will be number 40. So, just kind of on the downhill side of things. And then Cody Gibson. Gibson's been on a rough stretch recently. Lost to Brad Katona in the finale of that season of The Ultimate Fighter, then lost to Miles Johns. This feels winnable. This might also be Gibson's last shot. Like, if he drops this one, they might just cut him again. At Kelleher's age, look, he can absolutely win this fight if Gibson gets reckless. I'm going to go with Gibson, give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, but his back's up against it. And he probably knows that. He's not stupid. All right, next up, women's flyweight Miranda Maverick, I already mentioned, was supposed to fight Tracy Cortez. Instead, she gets late replacement fighter Dione Barboza. Maverick has been trying to turn things around recently. She's had some weird fights. She should have beat Macy Barber. The loss to Blanchfield was clean. Won a couple. Lost to Jasmine Jasdovic. A little bit of an upset there. Won her last two. She armbarred Priscilla Cachoeira, and then beat Andrea Lee via decision. Take a look at Barbosa for a second. She is 7-2, 4-fight winning streak. Has at least one win in the UFC. Only one win. Oh, right. She beat Ernesta Carrascate. She faded bad in that third round of that fight. Granted, Carrascate is like a swimmer. Was it like a national, on the national Lithuanian team or something they had mentioned? And so swimmers' lungs are special. And if you've never seen what a swimmer can do cardio-wise, especially if you're like a distance swimmer, those people are freaks. I'm gonna go with Maverick here, I think. Not to think badly of Barbosa, at all, but she's doing this on short notice. This would be a fairly significant step up in class level for Barbosa. Maverick seems like the pick. All right. Then lightweight, Loic Radzhabov and Trey Ogden. So Radzhabov, another one of those Tajikistan fighters, 18-5-1. What, 1-1 in the UFC? 2-1. So he came in, beat Esteban Rabovic, pretty good win. Lost to Mateusz Rembeshki, no real shame there. Then beat Abdul Karim Al Salwadi. Third round stoppage in that one. I don't remember if he needed the stoppage, but it was a nice finishing sequence. I tend to think okay about Radzhabov. Ogden, 17-6. Got no contest thrown in there. 2-2 with a no contest in the UFC, coming off that win over Kurt Holloway. Had that weird fight with Nicholas Mata that was prematurely stopped, hence the no contest. Lost to Ignacio Bahamondes. Lost to Jordan Levitt. I think he's better. I don't mean to say that to be like knocking on Jordan Levitt. Going with Radzhabov. There's a few of those Tajik fighters, man, that I'm not saying they're going to win every fight, but they're good. There's a few guys right now that fighting out of there that are not saying they're going to take over the UFC or anything, but they are definitely they're not here to just be here. They are here to try and do some stuff. And Radzhabov would be part of that contingent. All right. Let's see. Women's flyweight, Luana Carolina and Lucia Pudilova. I don't know that I pick Luana Carolina to win fights. She's on a two-fight winning streak over Ivana Petrovich and Yulia Stoliarenko. She missed weight in that Stoliarenko fight, though. Pudilova, two-fight losing streak. Lost a split decision to Jocelyn Edwards. Did I score that for her? I don't know. I might have. Lost a decision to Eileen Perez after that. Tough one. Am I actually going to pick Carolina? Feels like I'm about to, doesn't it? Yeah, I think I am. Not by a whole lot. This is a very, very close fight. Yeah, all right, I'll go with Carolina. Ugh, can't believe I'm doing that. Let's see. And then kicking everything off, God help us heavyweights. Muhammad Usman and Thomas Peterson. So, Usman is 10-3. 3-1 in the UFC, coming off a loss to Mick Parkin. That was not a good fight. None of his fights have been good. Just at all. Peterson, 8-2. Lost his UFC debut, I believe. Yeah, to Jamal Poogs. They're giving Usman a get well fight here is the long and the short of that one, which he might still lose, but that's the intent, I pretty clearly believe. So, all right, there's that. Not a good card on paper. Not a card I would be watching if it was not my job. And there's a few of those that have been cropping up lately, but I will be covering it. MMA Zone of 411mania.com this coming Saturday. So as always, stop by, say hello. It's always appreciated. Alrighty. Get a couple of news bits here, and then we will get out of here. We don't have to do anything too crazy. All right. Let's start with this one. So the French-Canadian broadcast of, I think, the last UFC event appears to have announced, potentially spoiling, 2 fights for the upcoming event in the Sphere. So UFC Noche or whatever it winds up being called officially. Because there'll be another designation for it. But they're big ones. They're really big. They listed Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili and Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. These are 2 of the better fights you can make. One of them is maybe the best fight you can make in the sport. The other is just the obvious and necessary fight at bantamweight. Topuria and Holloway, yes. My veins, just jam that in there. There's a lot of people who don't understand how good Ilia Topuria is. I'm not saying sleep on Max Holloway. Please do not misunderstand me about that one. My love and admiration for Max Holloway is well documented. That man is one of my favorite fighters. And I don't pick against him very often. I did in the Gagey fight. Came back to bite me. Should have thought that one through a little bit more. I picked against him, I think the third Volk fight. Might have been the first one, too. Those ones I don't remember exactly. Those ones I was real curious about. I think I picked him to beat Poirier when they fought at lightweight. I don't remember how I picked that one, but there's a lot of guys really high off of what Max is coming off of, understandably so. Only gave us an all-time UFC moment. But there's a lot of people that are not understanding how good Topuria is. and some of how he's going to match up with Max. I'm not making a prediction on that fight right now. That's going to take some serious tape study on my part. What I am saying is there's a lot of there's there doesn't seem to be reason to takes on this. There's the Max is going to carve him up crowd because Max is an all-timer, and the Max was on his way to being a journeyman crowd before the Gagey fight. So anyone who has that opinion of Max Holloway, congratulations. I know how long you've been watching this sport. For the record, I know you did not watch his actual featherweight title reign. I know that you did not watch him ascend through the ranks. I know that. You haven't been here long enough to have a real opinion on Max Holloway. So, but I, at the moment, I lean a little bit to Poirier, not a whole lot, and I am the last guy on earth who's going to sleep on Max Holloway, like ever. So, not sleeping on him, but that's a heck of a fight. That is a heck of a fight. And O'Malley and Wallace really, that's going to go dramatically one of two ways. Because Merab's been hit early before and has been hurt, and if O'Malley can do that to him, he might put his lights out. But if he can't, Merab's pace, man, and Merab's commitment to the wrestling is just unreal. I don't expect that to be a back and forth nip and tuck affair. I tend to think that's going to go whatever direction that swings. It's going to be fairly dramatic, is my hunch. But if that is legitimate, if those two are announced officially, like the UFC throwing most of their stuff into pointless content and then trying to stack a select like 4 or 5 events a year. I don't know that I love that model for them, but that seems to be what they're doing at the moment. So, yeah. But I'm not complaining about either of those fights. Speaking of fights looking at having been made, let's take a quick look at UFC 305. I think that one got some new fights recently. So this will be the Duplessis and Adesanya card in Perth, Australia. Yeah, this got a couple of more fights. So we now know we don't have a bout order for this, but we do know the whole card. Duplessis and Adesanya for the belt in the main event. Cool. You know, this is the first time 2 African-born fighters are fighting for a UFC title. That should be a bigger deal than it is at the moment, I think. I mean, I know there's some heat over, who's the real African champion, and a lot of people got really sour at Duplessis for saying that. I appreciate his explanation of it, where all those other guys, the other guys who have been champions that are from Africa, you've had a few. You had Kamaru Usman. Wait, I can't remember. I think Usman was born in the United States but moved to Nigeria. Or he was born in Nigeria and then moved to the United States fairly quickly. I can't remember which one it is. So forgive me on that one. But you had Kamaru Usman. You had Francis Ngannou. You had Israel Adesanya. And now you've got DDP, and I understand people getting a little bit salty at him for that one. I appreciate that his logic is basically they all left and I stayed. Now, granted, Nigeria or Cameroon and South Africa are not. I'm not accusing Cameroon or Nigeria of being like third world dirt holes. I don't think that's accurate, and I don't think that's fair. But South Africa, for all of its turmoil, and boy has there been turmoil in that country, it also modernized for a variety of reasons, faster than other parts of Africa. And believe me, not necessarily because of political stability. Feel free to look up the history of that. But Johannesburg was like a very important location for a long time. And so it just, again, for want of a better expression, it modernized faster than a lot of other places in Africa. And it sort of just facilitated. The end result of all that is modern South Africa, which is not perfect and has plenty of problems, but there are places and there are facilities that can be legitimately world class for training. And I'm not as sure that Cameroon has that or that Nigeria has that for MMA at the moment. These things can all change. So, point being, I understand kind of what DDP was saying. I can also very easily understand why some other, especially other like African fighters, got a little bit salty at him for it. Those are two very understandable positions, I think. And because we live in the world we live in, everybody else got, a little bit. Everybody and their dog had to chime in because Abdul Razak Al Hassan brought it up when he was like doing media for this last event, and then everybody chimes in with their 2 cents, and yeah, it turned into one of those internet things for a few hours. For a few hours on a Friday, it was a thing. But we also have Kai Kara France and Steve Erceg. Good. Love that fight. Tai Tuivasa and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Boy, oof. Then Junior Tafa and Walter Walker. Oof. Casey O'Neill and Teresa Bleda. Okay. Josh Kulabau versus Ricardo Ramos. Jack Jenkins and Gavin Tucker. That's good. That's a good fight. Tom Nolan and Alex Reyes. Okay. Stuart Nickel and Jesus Santos Aguilar. Li Jing Liang back in action against Carlos Prates. That could be okay. Song Kanan and Ricky Glenn. They're trying to kill Ricky Glenn. And the big one announced from this last week, Mateusz Gamrot and Dan Hooker. Heck yes. That is probably your co-main event, if we're being honest. If it's not, it's your hot opener for the pay-per-view. That's a really good fight. Really good fight there. So, yeah, UFC 305 looking pretty good. That's looking like a very solid pay-per-view. Okay. Any other fights announced this last little bit? We know that Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady will main event an Apex card. Okay, we don't know enough about. We know a few fights. How do we? Burns and Brady is a perfectly serviceable main event. What else do we got? Cater and Nelson. That'll be okay. Jessica Andrade is fighting. All right, so it's maybe a slightly above average Apex card at the moment. Hopefully it holds together. Do we know enough about UFC and ESPN Plus 101? Not really. Ooh, Roman Kopylov and Bruno Ferreiros on that card. That's a good fight. Anything else there that stands out? Not especially. But Kopylov and Ferreira, that'll actually be pretty good, I think. Okay, UFC 30. Oh, UFC 306 is the Noche card. So this is the one that again potentially got spoiled for the main event and co-main event. Yeah, I am not going to complain one iota if you put those two fights on that card. Not one bit. Let's see, the France card. Oh, we know. We know before UFC 308, which will be in Abu Dhabi, they announced their first fight for that card. Cyril Gahn and Alexander Volkov in a rematch. Gahn already beat Volkov in a fairly. It was a solid win over 5 rounds, but it was fairly unremarkable. We're having that rematch. Okay. Not really my favorite thing, but yeah, that's where we are. So that is those were our fight announcements for the last week. Let me poke Twitter real fast, see if anything crazy is broken there, and if not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Nope, nothing new there, so plugs. I don't think there's going to be a Damn You Hollywood this week. We have that off. Potentially, I will be on a different movie podcast on Thursday. I might show up for, it's called Movies That Don't Suck and Some That Do. I'm still kind of debating that one. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Be on the lookout for that. If I am going to be there, it'll be talking long legs, and I'll have to ask what the format over there is: one theatrical movie and one streaming movie per episode. And the theatrical release would be Long Legs, which I did see, and I'd see what streaming movie they will be attaching to that. So maybe, don't know for sure yet. That one's a little bit up in the air at the moment still. So I have to wait and see on that. I did enjoy, very briefly for you guys, Long Legs was good, not great. Good. Perkins, he's a bit self-indulgent. I'm not sure if this is better than the Blackcoat's Daughters, which is the other of his movies that I recommend. I don't recommend the other two as a general rule. If you are thinking about watching Gretel and Hansel, just watch The Witch instead, and you'll get a better version of what he was trying to do there. So really good acting. The writing's kind of where it falls down, and there's some weird narrative choices, but if you like horror movies, it's probably worth your time in general. It was a bit overhyped, was kind of its problem, I think. It's good. It's not. If you listen to the sound bites or like the clips of reviews or whatnot, it's not what most of those that are like best thing ever kind of stuff. It's not that. It's still good. Okay. WWE SmackDown on Friday, per usual. UFC event on Saturday, and we will be back here in a week to review UFC on ESPN 60 and preview the one fight card in July that actually they put effort into, UFC 304, with Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad, Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades, Bobby Green and Paddy Pimblett, Muhammad Akayev and Manel Kopp. Jeez, how long is this card? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 fights with 2 title fights? Ugh. You're asking for trouble there. You're really asking for trouble. But this is actually a solid card. Some of it's not, but you're not. It's too much to ask to have 14 good fights on a card. That's just on paper. That's just never gonna happen. Give you the full preview of that next week though. So tune back in. Hope to see you then. All right, that's it for me for the week. Stay safe out there, people. I say it every week, and I mean it. It has the potential to get crazy out there, and well, it's only going to get worse before it gets better. Sorry, that's a bit of a downer way to end this, but stay safe. Seriously, stay safe out there. Hopefully you'll come back next week. Thank you very much if you do. Till then, in addition to staying safe, I invite you to continue to be well, be safe, and behave.